Also do a local recording.
Hey guys,
Yeah.
What's up, Jeff?
how's it going?
Good. Were you able to get food?
I do, yeah. I might eat at the beginning. I made myself food before I went out, and then I just happy Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesday, October. Can you believe it?
No, I want to go back. I want my time back. It's too fast.
Yeah.
Um,
With how this year is going, I'm hoping that it ends.
four upper division STEM classes is like just
also just everything that's happened this year.
property management.
Yeah, I was also thinking like in context of COVID, and
Oh yeah,
we have our
Wide pandemic.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready for that to be gone for sure.
Big time.
Is there an agenda that I'm supposed to can look at or should look at before we start?
Steve can drop the link in. I'm on it at the moment.
Yeah.
I had a thought before I checked in with Steve earlier today that for future meetings, it might be kind of fun for us to all set a personal goal to teach each other something during these meetings. So whether it's something STEM related or not STEM related, but just like, you know how they do those like 2-minute talks at Toastmasters, Jeff, where you like present on something kind of freestyle. So we won't completely freestyle because we'll have an entire week to prep for it, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to, try to teach each other something in these meetings with like a 5-minute limit on it.
I like that. Can I follow that up with an idea?
Mm-hmm.
Can we focus on teaching each other something directly related to content creation and either writing, content creation, or something directly related to the delivery process in the learning code?
Yes, I am writing.
That's a question, that was a question, not a statement, Steve. And Henry.
You guys are talking about for what our post should be about, or
just in general, like if we're going to do like, so one of the things I want to learn from Henry is how to use, I think you said Adobe Premiere, to take a long clip and then cut it into sections, right? I would love to see you do that. You taught me a few weeks ago, Henry, or maybe it was I don't remember when, how to do the timestamps on the YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Right. And just stuff like that, like where we're using, if we're going to, I think that would be kind of helpful, right? Like how to use YouTube cards and just like tricks of the trade,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've been reading a good amount from Sean, just like random stuff. I don't have his book, but I've been kindling some of the videos he's put out. But I'm open to that for sure. I think I was actually also thinking like potentially even teaching both of you something that I'm like having to learn in my classes. So, yeah. So Steve, so what I meant is like, since we're meeting every single week, I thought it'd be a nice kind of challenge / collaborative effort and pursuit to teach respective group of ours something during these meetings, right? So that as an actual agenda item, so that, we have an entire week to think about what we want to present. And I use the word teach loosely here. Like it could be a discussion, but in general, I thought that'd be kind of fun.
I don't know if I have much to offer in terms of content creation, but I'll absorb as much as I can.
Yeah, I'm down. Can we go over the agenda and then we'll start with our check-in? Just to kind of, I think that's a good habit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so what I put on the agenda was just basically we could do the catch up, and then for my third item, it's just I'll probably share it as my catch up, always transition into it, but like I've been kind of losing some sleep on just like the thought of a PhD and like how many years that's going to take and what I'm going to have to sacrifice for that. And then for the fourth one, I know we had mentioned last week about mission statements and maybe trying to narrow that down. So if we want to maybe set not or define what a mission statement is and a vision statement, not necessarily define what it is for us, but just so we know what we should try to define it as, and then maybe set a date for a brainstorm, or so we can go do some homework on it and then come back and share. And then I know Henry wanted to talk about an idea called long form thinking from Cal Newport. And then we just share some to-dos of what we should expect from the week. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Should we jump right in? I think this is a great agenda for today. I'd love, we have an open question, which is how to best leverage these meetings. And I think eventually we can settle in on a routine. I think one thing that I think is really powerful every time, so if it starts at 2, it might be a good idea to like the first, maybe each of us, I can start sponsoring agenda items too. Maybe, I don't know how we get into the process of like sharing the workload equally. But starting with the agenda, then the check, I feel given, I feel it's really important that we get a chance to check in and see how things are going. And then I also know that like the ability to do the type of creative thinking that you're thinking about, Henry, and capturing those is really important. And so I think there are ways that we as a team can figure out how to work all that into a 75-minute period and do it well, right? But I wouldn't try to do that all in one day or 1 week or 1 month or 1 year, right? Just continual thinking. Should we get started with the catch up or anything else on the agenda?
Henry, take us away.
You want me to start, Steve?
Yes.
Let's see. I have a midterm at 4:30 today, so that's on my mind. But it's been going okay. I'm increasing my learning pace a little bit gradually. But yeah, I've also just been having conversations with fellow peers and faculty, and including Catherine Lee, about how this semester is going, and it's painful. But I'm fortunate that my house hasn't burned down from the fires in this state. I'm fortunate. I mean, there are some war-torn countries right now, even in 2020. So that certainly gives some perspective on what I'm trying to do as a student at San Jose State and what I'm trying to do here at the Learning Code.
Have you been able to check in? I remember last week you said that you had gone to office hours to check in with the professors about just the struggle that you were having and some of the stuff that came up. And it sounded like how have those conversations, or how have those conversations been going, and any useful feedback, guidance, empathy?
So David Taylor, the Algorithms of Attitude gentleman, he's quite kind. So his part of the computer science department, every semester we get a hold put on our accounts before we can register, I think, and we have to meet with an advisor to get that hold taken off. And this semester he is my advisor. So I briefly met with him, and I have to meet with him one more time to go over my plan, because the other professors, for the most part, their response was, it's only going to get harder. So I better, toughen up with my skills if I'm serious about computer science. But David is willing to take a closer look at my schedule. He was also the one that told me kind of some insider information that the department is looking to hire a faculty that is what you called a few meetings back, Jeff Anderson, a double agent, right? Not only are they have STEM expertise, but they've been also formally trained in pedagogy or education. So I'm looking forward to that meeting, but I've just been, barely above water with my classes, because it's really lecture after lecture, assignment after assignment. So just to kind of carve out some time to think about that. before checking in with him. I also noticed the change my major button is higher on our website than everything else in the advising and counseling. So I think that goes to show how many students are changing their major, how many STEM students are changing their major.
Let me ask you this. So one of the questions that I had last time was about scheduling. This problem that you're running into this quarter, I think, is endemic. It's all over the place in higher education. You guys are living it in the sense that you're dealing with it like right now, right? But my entire 4 years of undergraduate and my 5 years of graduate school, I would lie to you if I said, oh yeah, I just walked through and I never had these doubts. In fact, every day of every quarter that I was in school, these same feelings came up. At that time, I used to blame myself. I used to say, it's just, I'm not cut out for this. If I was not cut out for this, and I would be better. It's my fault. What can I do to change myself? And what I've learned as being an instructor and thinking really critically about my own teaching is that is a systemic problem. So one of the things that we've talked about, Henry, is the strategy of purposely slowing things down, right? And previously you had said, I don't want to do that this quarter. And I completely respect that courage and that determination from the standpoint of you're looking at the goals that you had set. You're thinking about what it is that you wanted to learn and try, and you're saying, I want to stay in this and really go for it, right? I would ask, as you've been day after day, week after week, how that approach or how that like mindset, if there's been any changes on it, or another way to say that is if you could go back at this exact moment. So as of today, if you somehow had like a phone that would allow you to call yourself, I don't know, maybe spring quarter of last year, right? Because I think that was before you enrolled in these courses.
Right.
What would you tell yourself? What would you say to yourself?
Part of the reason I enrolled in 4 STEM courses this semester was the work that we've been doing for a year. I really feel like I have so many tools to learn more optimally and, study with more meaning. Another huge part is just looking at my ed plan. Even factoring in taking a summer course for CS to graduate like this summer, I still, my schedule would still be pretty crammed. And that's in addition with factoring in the fact that when I transferred to San Jose State, it'd be a 3-year plan. So those two are the larger influences as to why I ended up doing 4. Another issue why I did 4 was I was not diligent in scheduling. So like there was a hold on my account and I didn't take that hold off when my registration date happened. And because of that, I missed my slot. And CS classes fill up really fast here because we have competing majors from engineering departments and other people also like trying to do CS. So I actually didn't formally enroll in the schedule that I'm in right now until after the first week of this semester. So that was like I'll never make that mistake again.
Okay, so capture that exact thing that you just said. Can you capture that in like a short sentence, or not even a short sentence, but like if you could give, what's the major lesson that you got out of that pain?
Major lesson is know my registration date and prepare before that registration date arrives. Because I actually knew it. It was on my calendar, but there was a hold that snuck up on my account due to financial aid issues. So by the time I was looking at registration, the courses that were in my plan were, for the most part, pretty full already. And the waitlist system here is a little bit different than Foothills. It's not like how you would think. So moving forward, for sure, I know, get the registration date for spring of this year and make sure there's no holds and give myself wiggle room as far as if I'm limiting myself to 2 STEM courses a semester, or what are the other 2 courses going to be? And that takes some research for sure.
Or, I mean, the 2 rule, you could borrow that if you feel like that's what you want to do for the first quarter. So I think that you have a ton of skills that you can leverage, Henry. And I've thought back into my own college education, and one of the questions that I asked myself is what was it that I did that allowed me to get straight A's in my classes? Because I can tell you that I was not learning deeply in those classes. Like I straight up, like if you asked me at a senior year after I got an A's in my algebra class and my real analysis class, I knew very little about those subjects, even though I had gotten good grades in them, right? And if I compare what I see you guys doing to what I was doing, you guys are actually learning more than I had learned, even though I was getting grades in them. And this is in the context of us working together, but I realized that in graduate school. I realized that I didn't understand what I was doing in undergrad, and I promised I'd never do it again. And so one of the questions that I asked myself, well, what was it about my degree that allowed me to like get perform in using those metrics, and yet still not actually have a ton of value out of it? And 2 things came up. The first thing was the most important lesson that I got out of my undergraduate degree was how to learn. So, what you guys are talking about now, I was teaching myself that the whole time. And that was by far the central location. So the grades were just kind of a mechanism by which I would teach myself how to learn within the classes and within these stupid constructs, right? But the other thing that I recognized was, as a high school student, I was not, I had a lot of guys that I was hung out with in high school that were a lot smarter than me. What they would call smarter than me, right? They would never study and they'd get good grades. And I had to study, like, for every math test that I took, I had to study hours and hours and hours. And I was often doing homework afterwards, and people would make fun of me. And so literally my friends would make fun of me, like, why are you studying so hard in high school? And I remember thinking back then, well, like, I can't learn this stuff without studying. And when I went back and I thought about it, one of the things that happened was, because I had those habits in high school and because there was positive reinforcement, the day I transferred over to UC Santa Barbara, I was learning in the equivalent of like Math 1B, but I already taken Math 1B, half of Math 1B in high school as the AP course. So when I was in the first math course that I ever took, I didn't have a heavy burden of intellect or cognitive load. All I had to do was figure out how to study. But because I had already had a ton of experience in high school learning how to study, those skills transferred over. And basically my first quarter was, all I did was learn how to study in a new context. Like the chemistry class that I already took in high school. And so what ended up happening was, that first quarter, all I did was transfer the learning skills over. And then because the content was low cognitive load, the next quarter was a little higher cognitive load, but I could get more help the next quarter after that. Sadly, there was nowhere in the system that was actually teaching me how to think about the content. But in that, the reason that I think this is important for this conversation is, if you were to look at the way that I progressed as a student, it was it was a slow process. So like my first quarter, I was taking AP Chem, AP Calc, and psychology of drugs and stress or something like that, right? Then the next class I did like AP, Calc 1, Calc, Chemistry 1, and Psychology, Drugs, and Stress. And then the next quarter was Calc 2, Asian American Literature was a really cool class that I took. And then, Human Sexuality, right? So, and then the next one was like Nutrition, Calc 3. So every time in the early stages, there was only one STEM class. And then eventually what happened is I got higher and higher, and then there were 2 STEM classes. But the 2 STEM classes were like one lower division STEM class and my first upper division STEM class, right? And so if you looked at the progress, right, like, if one of these is load and one of these is ability, what ended up happening is the first quarter, my ability was higher than my load. And what was nice about that is then I didn't have to think about the content. I could just think about the study skills. Then the next quarter, the load went up a little bit, but it was right along where my study skills were at that moment, right? So I'm developing new study skills. The load goes up a little bit, right? And so what ended up happening is every time school is a moving target, right? So every time the load goes up a little bit, in my case, the reason that I got super lucky was that the load went up commensurate with my skill base. And then I had this, like, I recognized, I was conscious enough at the time to recognize that I have to be really, really careful. So it wasn't until like my third or fourth year, I think, that I took 3 STEM classes because I recognized how hard that was. And I remember that quarter was just hell. I was doing like, it was a really tough quarter. And at that moment, I was like, I'll never do that again. But the thing that I would pose to you here is, like, you have those skills, Henry, and you've been developing those, but that all of a sudden, if we put ourselves, if we schedule ourselves so that the load is way higher than the practice level of the skills, that's where we run into the wall because we can't meet that difficulty. And so the thing that I try to say this all the time, I've said this to you guys multiple times, but I also just think about it a lot with my students. You know, I think that you could probably, I've actually no doubt that you could get straight A's in 4 STEM classes and learn deeply. But the question is, when are you going to do that? And what quarter you're going to do that? And my feeling, just from the psychology of success, you guys have heard me say multiple times, it's better to be a big fish in a small pond.
Yeah.
And the reason that I say that is, it's better to have a string of small wins than a string of big losses, right? So another way to say that is, what I would do for myself, and this doesn't at all get into the financial considerations, which I think are important, and I want to ask you about that. But like, I would encourage you not to make a long-term statement about yourself, like, I'll never take 4 STEM classes, or I'll never take 3 STEM classes, or I have to take 2 or whatever, right? That was a rule that I used for myself as like a decision-making factor. Like, if I have a rule that I never take more than 2 STEM classes, and then I'm taking a 3rd STEM class, I have to think really hard about why I'm doing that and what I'm going to do differently, right? And so the question that I might ask you as a follow-up question, you know, what I just heard you say was, I got to be really aware of my registration dates. And then I heard an open question that you said as a statement, like, I don't know, basically you said, like, maybe I'll take no more than 2 per quarter for the rest of time per semester, right? But the question that I would ask is, what type of strategy might you adopt so that the next time you go, the load basically matches the cognitive load of the classes matches the skill level that you have at the time, and gives you ample time to refine those skills as you're working through the class. And so you can lower that, you know, you lower the load that you have so that you can work through that. And then as you gain success in that one, that's where you level up, right? So like, imagine this, here's a scenario to do this. Imagine you had taken 2 of those 4 classes this quarter, but you had really focused in and you achieved all your significant learning goals, and you achieved your top grades in those classes. And then next semester you took the 2 other classes, you did the same thing, you filled in the other gaps. That's an open question, like, what other classes are you going to take? And then next year, so now you've built 2 semesters in a row where you're achieving all of your goals at the same time. You have ample time, you have time to work it out, do it 2 in a row. And the next year, fall semester, you choose 3. But in the meantime, you've kind of like, and then you should try 3. And if it doesn't work that great, then you reiterate, right? And then slowly, that's where you build up to that capacity to 4, right? And so that's an open question. I don't necessarily want to answer. In fact, I would say don't answer that right now. But that's one thing that as you guys are thinking about it, I think this relates to what Steve is going to share with us later. But the way I always think about this is thinking like a 90-year-old in this case, a 35-year-old's body, right? in your case, thinking like a college graduate in a third year's body, right? So like, instead of thinking about and I do agree for sure that the financial constraints are real and that the age constraints are real. This is one of the most brutal parts of the system. But the flip side is like, one of the things that really frustrates me about the education system is that we create an impossible situation.
David was, I was addressing some of the issues in STEM education, and in that office hours, he said, it is impossible, as you say, Jeff, because there are some students certainly who have had exposure with these STEM concepts at a deep level since potentially elementary school. And then some students like myself, I guess I had exposure, but at gun, kind of, but it was like negative exposure. It wasn't like exposure that made me like really want to learn this stuff. So really at first, like in college. So if we were to just focus on the demographics of students that became somewhat aware of what STEM means and what it means to take a math course or a science course, and I guess the education is structured around that we are supposed to be somewhat semi-functioning professionals at the end of 4 years. But that's like saying to someone who doesn't speak a word of English that they can rap battle in the end of 4 years. It's just almost designed to not happen. So I love the advice on thinking about what is attainable and how can I progress so that it is manageable. Yeah.
The next part of that is, one of the first things that happens when when we come up with those questions is well, I have to get out in a certain amount of time because this is my physical age, or tuition is really expensive, so I can't like put off my graduation for forever. And a lot of times students will have their parents, many young students that I work with are lucky enough to have their parents paying the bill. And the parents don't necessarily understand the entire process in college. And so the parents have only budgeted for 4 years. And so immediately the parents will project upon the student, you need to be able to finish this degree in 4 years. And because the student has never thought to themselves, oh, by the way, I could actually figure out how to fund this degree without my parents. Like there's no wiggle room there, right? And I think one of the powerful mechanisms for rethinking, I guess, strategies is to ask a very important question, which is, what's that end game, right? And I think that's what Steve is doing now. Like, what's the end game? Where am I going with this, and what are my constraints right now? And that's not an easy question to ask. And for me, it took years of meditation. But it's one of the things that I think is super important in this conversation, to be able to make that connection between what's the end game, where am I now, and then what would I need, instead of thinking like, it doesn't matter what the end game is, I have to finish at this particular date. I think that's where we recapture our own narratives. Like if it's the case that one of the things that I find a lot that happens with young students is they'll say like, why I have to get out sooner. Well, why do you have to get out sooner? Because I'm young and I want to have my life started at this particular date and this particular, et cetera. And that's where I would ask, like, really suss those things out, really suss that vision out for yourself, like define what that vision is and let that vision inform the decision. It's a longer process, but I think that's a powerful thing. And so I don't know what the question is for today, how we converge on that. But I definitely hear, one of the things that I hear from you, this is a question, not a statement, is the amount of time that it would take to learn this material does not seem to be equal to the amount of time that either you yourself or the institution is defining that you have. This is a question.
Yeah, I would say this semester for sure is a semester of realizing, like, to just pass, to be honest, will really require some strong concept images and mental models of what these professors are expecting. I think just to pass. And I've never, I guess maybe physics 4B at Foothill was kind of like that. But in my CS courses, I've always been able to work with other peers. So they've kind of carried that a little bit. But now, like, almost every single professor, including David, like, there's a huge emphasis on, like, actually not working with other people and not not doing a number of things that I normally was doing. Like, part of that is being online only. But another huge part is, like, they remind us almost like every single class on not to work with other students, not to do this, not to do that. And it just really creates a not such good environment for, and in this case, the only two tutoring centers on campus that have CS tutors have 0 registered tutors for any of my 4 classes. So it's that was a unique realization. But I think moving forward, like, these classes really are much more demanding, especially when it's 4 times.
Yeah. More on that. I think, yeah. So I have a final review, but I want to make sure that Steve has a chance of checking out. So the problems that you're going through right now, this is, again, the local and global, right? I would claim that I think what we're about to hear from Steve, if it relates to what he was talking about earlier, are directly related to what you were just saying, just a different horizon of focus, right? So Steve, talk to us about some of those doubts that were coming up. Where you're at, what's going on, how you...
Yeah, so I think just because having to write my blog post, I kind of had to, like, focus a lot on some, like, what my values were, like what I want from my education, and kind of like looking forward, like a vision for my life. And that kind of scared me because like, I know I've been thinking about getting a PhD, but now that I think more and more about the numbers, and like, this gradually, I got this fear kind of from getting what you came for, but now, like, I don't know if it's starting to kick in a lot more, because by the time I would start my PhD, it would be like, I'd be between 26 and 27, and then I would finish, because the average age, what it said, at least in the book, was around 7 years for a math PhD. So I'd finish around 34, and I know that I would not, at least I'm under the impression that I would not have any, like, financial security at that time, because I would just finish, or at least for myself, not relying on my parents, which I don't necessarily want to be relying on my parents in my 30s. And I don't know, that kind of scares me. And just, it also kind of sucks, just say if I have some friends or my brother, people who invite me to things, and I have to turn it down because I don't have money. And I feel like, I mean, that was a problem. I mean, that's just been a thing. Like, I've never had a good chunk of money, and I don't know, I kind of want to change that for myself. And to know that I'm thinking about pushing that off until, like, my mid 30s, like, that really scares me. Like, that keeps me up late at night, because I'm like, I haven't been able to sleep too well, because I think, like, oh, I don't want to let down Jeff and Henry, because, I mean, I'm interested in pedagogy and, like, math. Like, I really enjoy math. Like, I read math in my free time, and but I don't know, I'm just tired of being broke. I want to be responsible for myself, and, like, I'm probably gonna have to, like, well, it'll be shared between me and my brothers, but I have to be responsible for my parents as well. I mean, they're getting up there in age. So I don't know. That's just very stressful, and that's been on my mind a lot. Uh, I don't know if I had been maybe graduating at 22 or 23, maybe this would be different. But I'm gonna be graduating around 26, 27. Um,
Can I give you some ideas, or do you want to?
Yeah, sure. You give me some ideas.
Okay, so you guys both have expressed interest in getting in becoming a community college instructor or a math instructor at a high school, right?
Yeah.
High school math instructor is going to be a little bit different because you have to do a credential process. Community college instructor will require at least a master's degree. Like that's min quals. You could also do a bachelor's degree with a number. You guys know how to get the min quals? Do you know about that? How to actually access where they're located on our website?
No.
On Foothill's website, you can see the requirements for min quals in a bunch of different ways through the, so let's see. And this would probably be true for any community college that you teach at. So let's do Foothill College faculty agreement. This is our unions. We're so lucky to be unionized. And then this is the actual contract. It's open access to everybody who wants it. I don't know if they have min quals. They certainly have a description of min quals in the salary schedule. Yeah, here it is. So column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5. This, you can read what you kind of see this, Steve?
Yeah.
Associate's degree and 6 years of appropriate work experience, bachelor's degree and 2 years of appropriate work experience, master's degree, or, so that's column 1. Mm-hmm. Column 2 is master's or bachelor's and 2 years of appropriate work experience. Column 3 is master's degree and 24 semester units to date. Yeah, so, and then column 5 is earned doctorate, right? So one of the things that's interesting about this is you could actually calculate the difference between starting with a master's degree and a doctorate degree over your history, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, one of the things that's hard about the doctorate degree is that you put off earning money until later in your career. But one of the things that's nice about it is if you land with that, like it's a full $1,000 a month more. So you're getting $12,000 a year more to begin with, but then propagate that over a career.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't necessarily mean like that's a good decision right now, but you could do some analysis on that money, right? You could actually think to yourself, that has nothing. So anyways, these are the min quals. If you're interested in a community college degree, like having a master's degree is what I would call a bare minimum to entry.
Yeah. Okay.
So here's a question. If you don't do a PhD, how are you going to fund your master's degree?
I don't know if there is a way to fund the master's.
Yeah, and so the point of, I encourage you guys to research the PhD. This is where I would prefer not to be on YouTube at this moment, but I'll go ahead and say it. If the point of encouraging the PhD is to give you options, in the worst case scenario that you decided that the PhD, this is where I would have you guys do due diligence and ask those hard questions prior to getting into the program. So if you apply for 3 different schools, you want to ask, can I get a master's in preparation for graduation? If so, how does that process work? Can you walk me through that right now? And if they ask, why are you asking about this? Are you planning not to finish? You can say, no, my career goal is to be a community college instructor. I'd like to get that on my resume. I know that many community college have part-time teaching jobs that I could do for the summer to make extra money. But many community colleges have a master's degree as a prerequisite for teaching. So if I get my master's degree in the first 2 years of my PhD, that allows me to make some money over the summer by actually teaching. And thus, I am asking this of you, my school, before I enter here. One of the things I want out of you all is to be able to get a master's degree prior to finishing so that I can get work experience in the community college network prior to graduating, so that when I graduate, I get my dream job, right? Mm-hmm. So do you see that narrative that you would tell the school?
Okay, yeah.
But the reality is, once you have that master's degree, guess what? If you want the option,
Yeah.
if you want, I'm not saying that that's the plan necessarily, but that gives you that option, right?
Mhm.
So it allows you to get your master's degree, you know, that's where you have to do due diligence. That's, you have to ask the questions like, what, you know, what do you offer? How does this work? And like do a lot of work up the front to prep yourself as a strong candidate. But if you get to a school that allows you to get a master's as part of the process, and you know what that process is, et cetera, and you've contacted the local community college board prior to entering, a few things will be true. Number one, you could get a master's while you're working on your PhD and start doing part-time work at a community college to make some extra money. If you've already communicated to your PhD advisor that that's something that you're going to do, that person will know that the first day they meet you, and that won't be a surprise to them, right? Because you can ask them, how would you feel if I did teaching during the summers? Do you have research fellowships? Are you going to pay me? How does that whole thing work, right? In the worst case scenario that you decided not to finish, as long as you have that master's degree in hand, if the goal job is to become a community college teacher, guess what? You just got to, whatever it took to get that master's degree, that's all you got to finish, right?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, you're paying $0 out of pocket. In fact, you're having a positive, not only you're not paying for your tuition, you're having money paid to you via the school's funding mechanism. You have an escape route that you've researched and you figured out what that looks like, and it gets you closer to that job. It lands you closer to that job further forward, and it allows you to give options. So even if it was this case that you decided later in your life, oh yeah, by the way, I actually do want to finish my PhD, the fact of the matter is you have the master's degree in hand, and for whatever reason, like, it just takes the psychological pressure away, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if the reason I didn't tell you, like, why don't you drop out of, not drop out, why don't you finish your bachelor's degree and then go pay for a master's? Well, guess what? How much a master's is going to cost you?
$20,000, $50,000
minimum, right?
Yeah.
Where you're not even able to pay rent because you're having to pay tuition.
Yeah.
Right. And all of a sudden when you, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, and then, well, I don't know if this probably didn't help me, but so I looked on like the internet for like jobs as community college, like math professors, and all of them were like adjunct positions. And I was like, oh man, I'm not gonna get any health benefits. Like I'm barely gonna make any money. So say if I did like end up trying to get the master's, like I don't know if that would be enough to like guarantee me like a full-time position right away, because I'm sure PhD makes you a lot more competitive.
I don't know about that statement. I don't know about the statement that the PhD would make you more competitive per se. I have some direct inputs. Searching that job today is a sad state of affairs. I wish you were on my email chains. We just got an email recently about whether or not we're going to be hiring a new math professor this year. What do you think about the school's appetite for hiring a new professor when we're having classes canceled because we're losing $15 million a year as a budget? None of the part-timers are getting full-time jobs, and we're thinking about huge budget cuts from COVID.
True.
So part of this has to do with timing, right? Like, what's the timing? And at this exact moment, if you were to try to get that job, it's not a great job market, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're not thinking about applying for this job today, are you?
No.
Yeah. So do you have a sense of when you would want to apply?
When I finish my graduate degree.
Yeah. So, and this is where one of the psychological mechanisms that I really like to use for high pressure situations is having multiple options. I think one of the issues that gets us into a lot of trouble in studies and in life is when we look at a problem and think there is only one option and I don't have that option myself, right? Mm-hmm. So a great example of this is the chain of assumptions that goes into testing. So a lot of students will see this. You've heard me explain this. If I do well on this test, I'll probably do well in this class. If I do well in this class, I'll probably do well in this degree. If I do well in the degree, I'll probably get a job. If I do well in my job, I'll probably have a good life. If I have a good life, I'll be happy and die healthy, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they don't do well on the test. So you know what happens? In their mind, during the test, as they're failing, they're not doing well on the test, which means they're not going to do well in the class, which means they're not going to have the degree, which means they're not going to get a job, which means they're not going to have a paycheck, which means their life is going to be really shitty. And live during an exam, they are projecting into the future, thinking about being homeless and without any money or love, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a fallacy, because it is not the case that people without college degrees are unhappy, right? Like, there are many people without college degree that are happy. It is not the case that doing well, like, there's just so many false assumptions associated with that. But the point is, those students will put themselves into what I call tunnel vision and not be able to see any of that and actually think, because they haven't disassociated those different options, right? So in your situation, like, one of the things that that I might encourage you to think about as you're staying up, you know, or better do it during the day so you can go to sleep at night, is giving yourself different options on what it is that you might want to do. So one of the things that I always like to do is worst case scenario option. I still have a worst case scenario option. If Foothill fires me, I am pretty sure that I can get a job at, I wouldn't do McDonald's, I might do Taqueria Los Gallos, because I like that place, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm pretty sure I can clean their floors. In fact, I'm pretty sure they'd be fucking clean ass floors, because I like to clean really well. So I wouldn't be making a ton of money. I don't think we could keep this house. We'd probably have to go rent. But if I died knowing that I'm paying rent with my family, like, it's okay, right? So if Foothill fires me, literally in my mind, I don't think at this point in my life, I think I would have many options. But in the worst case scenario, I'll fucking pull up my sleeves and work at a dead end job that doesn't give me any benefits other than just I pay the bills, etc. And I think I'll be okay. What do you think? Do you think I could do that job?
Yeah.
Do you think I do it well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. Okay, so guess what happens the moment that I feel that way? Guess what happens to all this pressure?
It's relieved.
Is it a super sexy life?
No.
No. But honestly, do I really need a super sexy life? Do I need to go to Vegas every weekend? I mean, when I think about myself, you know what I want? I want to be close to my wife. I want to be close to my kids, and I want to have time to take care of myself. That's why I work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe I shouldn't marry a woman that wants a big ass diamond every year and a half, right? But if I'm working at Taqueria Los Gallos, I probably won't marry that woman anyways, right? She's not.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings me, like, that's a baseline. So I don't know what your baseline is. That's something that you got to figure out for yourself, right?
Well, I think for baseline for like a happy life type.
Yeah, what's your baseline?
Well, I think that's the thing that would keep me up at night, because I'm under the impression that, like, I want to have like a family in like my 30s, or hopefully the earlier half. And I don't know if I would be able to be like financially responsible enough to do that if I do have to go for a PhD, because I would graduate at like 34, 35. So in my head, I'm like, it's either the PhD or a family. And I think that's the thing that's like, just keeps me up at night.
And that's real. I mean, you got to listen to that, right?
Yeah.
Like that is a real, like, that reality that you're going through is legit. So I think you should capture that. One suggestion that I would have in this moment is to try to. You're not about to have kids right now, right?
No, hopefully.
And Henry and I are like missing a wedding invitation or anything, right? Because I checked my mail earlier and I didn't get no wedding invitation. So if you're telling me like you're gonna get married next week, I'm gonna be like, what the fuck? So this is all projection into the future, right?
Yes.
So,
or at least try to plan for that.
Yeah, which is super smart. But I think, you know, what I hear right now is is the same type of thinking, which is good thinking, right? The fact that you're even thinking about this is good news because it means that you're giving yourself lead time, right? Mm-hmm. But I hear the same type of trap that you're setting for yourself that the student on the test who's struggling sets for themselves, right? It's either I do well on this test or I'm homeless.
Well, I guess my backup would be like if I graduate just to my bachelor's and try to get a job straight from there. So I guess that would be like my worst case scenario.
Can we go even worse than that, Steve?
Okay.
Because what happens when, like, let's go, what's the worst case scenario that you could ever think about right now? Like, give me down in the gutter, like shit scenario.
I don't know. I mean, I've worked in a restaurant and you make a decent amount of money. Like, you can rent an apartment. It's not the best living. You're working all the time, but you can get by.
Could you start a family on that?
I don't know.
Could you start a family in Tracy on that?
I mean, kind of. I don't know if I'd be. Maybe.
I mean, you would have to reevaluate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, formally speaking, you can start a family as there's not a law. I mean, we don't really have to go to that right now. It's not hard to have kids, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah. But
I mean, just like growing up, my parents always worried about money. So like, I just don't want to have that same type of thing for my kids.
Yes. Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. That's legit, right?
Yeah.
But I think like one of the things that's really shitty about the academic system, like it's really shitty about the academic system, is that we tie those two things together. And then for us navigating that system, it puts a lot of pressure. It's almost like if we don't finish our degree or if we don't finish on a certain time, we're not only failing ourselves, but we're stuck in that moment. And for me, I know one of the things that released a lot of pressure was to realize, even if I didn't finish a degree, even if I fucking failed, I'd be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like ultimately, let me ask you this. Your parents had a lot of stress associated with that, right?
Yeah.
But do you feel that they love you? And do you feel that your family is a strong family?
I mean, as of lately, yeah, but in our earlier years, like, wasn't as much like that.
Because they were working a lot.
Yeah.
That's deep. And so what you're saying is that you have part of what motivates you is to be able to escape that dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, at least when we were younger, usually like my dad, like as a truck driver, he worked a lot. He was a breadwinner, but he did have like this fatal like car accident type thing. Like he was in a wheelchair for like so many years of his life, and now he can walk again. I know you met him.
Yeah.
But like,
I remember his boot.
Yeah.
And his cane.
Yeah. So like for a lot of years, like that was a big strain on us, just medical bills and just a lot of the things that come with that. And just having 3 kids, and then my mom as a lunch lady and newspaper delivery, pizza. So I just want it to be comfortable and my kids to be comfortable. So I worry about
that. Okay. So can we go back to I mean, I hear you loud and clear. I hear you. And I think so you just tapped into one of the most powerful, the fact that you can say this out loud. Do you know what that tells me?
I don't know.
You have a fucking piece of dynamite for motivation. I mean, you have like, can you even describe out loud in words the feelings, the deep reserve of feelings that you have about this? Have you ever done that?
I mean, no. You like to press that.
Can you trigger it? Do you know how to access this when you're feeling low? Do you know how to say like, meaning what I hear right now is a fucking wellspring of motivation. That's what I hear right now. I hear somebody that is conscious of a very deep level of motivation going back to lived experience in their childhood.
Yeah.
Cool. Because now if you have that, like I would still challenge you, Steve, just because psychologically, I think it's an important thing to do. I would still challenge you to like, okay, let me not speak for you.
Okay.
It is really important for me when I'm in this scenario, when I'm feeling tight, that I think through my worst fear and recognize the form in which I will still be okay. So what I hear from you right now is one of your worst fears is basically being stuck in a dead-end job, trying to raise a family and not seeing them very often.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll not spend any more time on that, except for the last question would be, here's a question that I would pose that I have posed to myself many times. Why would I survive that? And why would I make sure that I have time with family? Or how would I survive that?
Mm-hmm.
What would I do to survive that? So that's a question, like just what would I do to survive that? How would I make sure that even in the worst case scenario that I could get through on a day-to-day basis and rebuild over time, right? Yeah. Okay, so we can stop talking about that. So we can put that aside. The next set of questions that I would ask has to do with levels. So let's assume that it's not an option to do a blue collar job for a while, right? Like, so for example, Steve, I wouldn't work at Taqueria Los Gallos for a long time. What I probably would do is work there until I could get my real estate license, and then I would fucking sell real estate.
Yeah.
Period. Like, honestly, if I wasn't a mathematician, I'd probably be selling real estate. I'm not joking about that, right? I think I'd have like the best website that I could make, and I have a bunch of handouts for buyers, and I like, yeah. So the Los Gallos would do for a few years. I would be training the whole time, right? I'd go to night school. It'd be fucking hard as shit, but eventually I'd come out, right? So assuming that you're not going to do that, the next question would be, well, what's another option for you?
Well, like worst case scenario?
Yeah.
Or what do you mean? Like, what's another option besides working like a minimum wage job?
Well, I mean, I can tell you something to think about, right? If you have a bachelor's degree and a teaching credential, you can get a teaching job at a high school.
Oh yeah.
Right. Teaching credentials. I wouldn't go for the one at USC that costs $100,000. I would probably go for the one at, like I don't know,
State or San Jose State.
Yeah, $10,000. You live at home. You finish that degree, right? And then you could take a loan out to get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get associated with the school that you like. Pay back. Live at home until you can pay back that loan. So a little bit difficult in the standpoint you're making some sacrifices, but in terms of launch time, that's much sooner, right?
Yeah.
You'd have to pay for that degree. It's something that you'd have to pay for, but you could do it though, right?
Yeah. How long do the teaching credentials usually last?
So guess what you now have? You now have an opportunity to go do some research on that career choice.
Yeah.
That's that I think we've talked about that. The 3 resumes.
Oh yeah. To like 3 jobs that you're looking into.
Yeah. And I would probably do 4 resumes in this case. If I were you, Steve, I'm not joking about this. I would prepare a resume being a waiter for a few years and come up with another career trajectory that pays well, that I could do for minimum training and make enough to support a family. So maybe that's one example of this is police officer. I don't want to be a police officer. I have no interest in that. But from the standpoint of taking care of a family, decent money, right? Firefighter, real estate agent. Those are all construction tech. That's hard on my body. I would be a little bit careful about that because the older guys, like you look at all those older guys and they're like cracking, right? But those are all jobs that I could, with a 2-year degree and training, I could get those jobs pretty quickly, even with another type of degree, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I was preparing these in your situation, I would identify in the worst case scenario that I didn't even get my bachelor's degree, or that I got a bachelor's degree and I didn't somehow go into teaching. What is a backup option that takes a minimum amount of training and has a relatively good pay job? And then I wouldn't be like super excited about it, but I could fucking do it to have the type of life that I needed, right?
Yeah.
Nursing would be another one that I would look into.
Mm-hmm.
Nursing's a little harder because you got to take chemistry classes and stuff like that, right?
I already got all the chemistry classes under the way. So.
Yeah, nursing pays pretty well. It's a hard job, but it pays fucking well, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that would be option one. Option two, I would look into, like, I'd actually prepare myself for all the stuff associated with getting a high school teaching credential. What does that look like? What are the questions that need to be asked? Where would I go? Where would I want to end? Can I get the pay scale at the type of school that I would want to work at?
Okay.
Option three.
Community college.
Yeah, community college, which requires a master's degree. And maybe one of those master's degrees is I pay out of pocket. So instead of going for a PhD, I just go to apply and I do it on loans, maybe. I don't know. Option four, apply for a PhD program, figure out if I can drop out with a master's degree, do it that way. Option five, apply for the PhD program, get my master's degree, get teaching experience, and finish my PhD.
Wait, get your master's degree.
And then finish my PhD.
Like later on or during, or getting the master's during the PhD?
During the PhD program,
okay.
Right?
Okay.
And that, you know, one of the major questions I hear you asking right now is, I don't hear you asking it like this, but can I make money while I'm in my PhD program enough to support a family?
Yeah. I don't know.
But I wouldn't worry about that right now. That's a larger question. Right now, you're trying to navigate, you're on a smaller level, right? Which is, or a lower level, right? Which is, you're trying to figure out what the path forward is. But those 5 options, do you notice anything in your, here's a question for you. When you hear those 5 options, what changes in your mind?
I mean, there's just options in general. And it's not like a guaranteed path to do the PhD. So like, yeah, I just have more options. So
yeah, explore all of them. Don't worry for a minute about whose life is this. Is it my life? Is it Henry's life?
It's mine.
Yeah. The reason that I want you to explore the PhD is because you're having to answer, like, let me ask you this. How many questions have you asked yourself because of the reading that you did on that program?
A lot.
Right? That's the point. The point is not like commit to your PhD and do nothing else and like make sure to like make us proud. No, there's nothing to fucking do with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The point is the PhD, there are many benefits that come from that. So let's explore those benefits. But while you're doing it, as those questions come up, track them. Like I would track those different and then like make a study of each of those things so that you have those options. And you know, if things go well, you take one option. If things don't go well, you have the other option. And you're constantly, every single day, you're doing something to make yourself more competitive. You know, use that motivation, use that fucking light that you showed us earlier today, right? And like really suss them out. Don't like, you know, create a file that says high school teaching credential. Create a file that says self-funded master's degree. Create a file that says PhD, you know?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. What'd you hear that was useful today?
Just consider a lot of options and then keep myself at mind too. This is my life. Yeah. I mean, that's the majority of it. Mm.
The last thing that I would say, both you guys have this. This is one of the reasons that I'm fucking floored by you. Both you guys have what I would call really, really strong sources of motivation that you carry with you. Do you know that about yourselves?
I don't know if I have motivation. I would just think of myself more as just like kind of just discipline. But I guess that goes hand in hand maybe with motivation.
You actually showed us the raw end of a nerve today.
Mm-hmm.
I know you have that too, Henry. You know that about yourself? I would write that down, Steve, and really come back to it over and over and over again. No matter what you do, like remember that motivation and use that as a mechanism, not the fear. There's both fear and there's love in that motivation, right? The fear is you don't want to feel the pain of childhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the love is like you're literally projecting into the future and thinking about the family that you want, and you're leveraging the love of that family to try to set yourself up for a better place in life, right?
Yeah.
That source of motivation is one of the strongest assets that you can, because this is going to be hard, right? And when the going gets tough, why do we do these things? And if you can say that to yourself, if you can leverage that as you're doing that research, I find to me, that's a gift. How many people in life do shit that they don't even know why they're doing it?
Like everyone.
Yeah. Including some people that become president.
Yeah.
All right. I think so. Did we get through?
Yeah.
That was so cool. A sneak peek of what reading and writing can do to our minds, right, Steve?
Yeah.
Like that is the first stage of long form thinking.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like a form of soul searching, but like sometimes it like touches things that you had buried in the past. But yeah. So I had written about the mission statement and the vision statement. I don't know if you guys want to set a date for when we can share what we think that is for ourselves.
Jeff has drafted up a mission and vision statement for the TLC. So I think if you have time, Steve, we should begin drafting that, and we can talk about it in our next meeting.
The next meeting? Okay.
Yeah.
Would you mind? I'd like to actually do some work on that. Would you mind if we put the due date? Can we do a primary check-in for next meeting, and then put the due date on that maybe 2 or 3 weeks away, so that we have like multiple weeks of check-in, so we can. Is that okay? I think one thing about that particular thing, and then we can get in. I think.
Jeff, I had a really quick question actually, since you shared that the earnings PDF earlier. In column 1, it had said associates or 6 years of equivalent experience. So that equivalent experience is like technically if Steve were to work in applied math, or probably more like teaching related equivalent experience.
Yeah, for community colleges, teaching probably. But here's an example. I was just talking to Nicole Gray, and she recently got to column 5, and she got to column 5 by doing semester units. So one of the things that has happened that I've seen happen, like if you can get, I would say effectively, it would be really hard to get a job at a community college without a master's degree. That would be a difficult thing to do. You could do it, but there would have to be really extenuated circumstances. So certainly in the Bay Area, the type of people who are going to apply for those jobs, master's degree would be a minimum. But like if you're working in a very rural place that doesn't have many applicants, that would be a possibility for sure, right? But like I've seen people that will transfer from one, like I don't know if, I think Eric Reed actually finished his master's degree, but I've heard of examples of people who were working in math and then went over to like CS, for example, or were working in like English and went over to history. So they had their master's degree in one thing, they did some units. So they did like they basically got the equivalent of a degree, but they didn't actually matriculate. So they didn't get the degree sent to them. They just took all the classes they needed to take. And so then they met min quals based on those units. And so then they, instead of just teaching English, they could also teach in history now because they meet min quals, right? And so I've heard that happen where, let's say you finished on column 2. So let's say that you were doing here, you get hired on column 2. So you have your master's degree and nothing else, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then over the course of your career, you do PDL units, professional development units. So like I'm on leave right now making YouTube videos, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons that I can do that and not worry about it is because I started in column 5. So a lot of my colleagues, they'll take classes for their PDL because the classes will contribute to their teaching, which is very true. But a fringe benefit of that is that they start to accrue units so that they can move over in the columns.
Got it.
Right?
Cool.
So I think it would be possible in some places that you could get a community college teaching job. And there are also like trade schools that do that, right? But I would say like to be a competitive applicant, I would definitely say that you probably want to get a master's degree, especially for a math job in the Bay Area, if that's where you were thinking you wanted to land. Yeah, and then don't worry, it is not the case that a PhD makes you more competitive per se. What they care most about is teaching experience. So if you had a master's degree and a bunch of teaching experience, I think that versus a PhD and 0 teaching experience, I think they teach the master's degree every day of the week and twice on Sunday, right? It's just that we don't have to go down that. There's a long discussion that I have about if you're smart about how you leverage your PhD, you can do both and rather than either or. Mm-hmm. One of the things that you're going to notice, Steve, is that it's actually not easy. I've had many people ask, I think you know the story, how was it possible that you got a full-time community college job and you never taught at a community college? Because the standard assumption, many of the people that get community college jobs do part-time work for years. Like years of part-time teaching work.
Yeah.
So they, like they're road warriors. I know a woman that was working at Cabrillo alone, basically the equivalent of Ohlone and Foothill. Right?
Yeah.
So like, we can talk more about that as we get closer to that thing. But there, like in my opinion, if there are ways that you could leverage a PhD where you're making more money because you're doing teaching on the side, your advisor is aware of, and so you're getting your PhD money for your tuition and living. You're doing part-time work on the side to accrue your teaching credentials, right? To make sure that you're a competitive applicant, and you're fulfilling that portion of it. Instead of working 2 classes, you're working 1, and you're filling the money with the extra money that you need with your PhD studies, rather than two full part-time jobs, right? And so you have the security of being a student while you have the professional development of actually teaching classes every quarter. And that's all stuff that would happen while you were asking the questions of your PhD program, right? That's kind of the vetting that you would do. We'll talk more about that later, but let me shut up on that. In terms of the mission statement and vision statement, I think when you were speaking just now, Henry, which document were you talking about for the mission statement and vision statement?
I would say the mission as the 6 central themes you drafted, at least that encapsulate a huge amount of our mission. And then the vision, I think I was talking about part of the intro that you drafted a while back was a bit of the vision.
So one thing, you guys have access to the questions for YouTube channel growth, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's one document that I think would be worthwhile. And then I also think we have let's see, I suppose this is the learning code, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let me get out of this thing. And then I want to do a time check. We're a little bit over, but this was a deep conversation today. Can you see this?
Share the file in the meeting. I can download it. I see it, and I have it opened.
Yeah, I see it.
I don't know that I would necessarily want to go into that type of writing right now. I think that's a little bit beyond where we are at this moment. And none of the categories there are valuable per se. I think we can change all those categories.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that would be useful if we're going to think about writing a mission statement is start to brainstorm on that. And so I might actually, if we were to go into that questions for YouTube channel growth or whatever it was.
Yep.
There are a bunch of questions in that. Can we create a separate document that has no comments but just the questions?
Yes.
Or can we like outsource some of, because I think some of these we commented on, right? I remember answering some of these.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if it was this document, but like just and then one thing that I might recommend that we do is, I wouldn't necessarily start with clarify our target audience. I would probably start with questions to clarify the reasons we are on YouTube. And I wouldn't even put YouTube on that. I would put the reasons that we are involved in the learning code.
Yeah.
And so I'll actually go ahead and just, because I did this, let me go ahead and just copy and paste. Okay, so do you see that I just copy and pasted everything, the first two groups of questions? Do you see that, Steve?
I don't.
Steve, I wasn't ready to go here yet, but you guys.
Oh yeah, I see it.
You guys have your foot on the gas pedals. So you see those ones that are highlighted right there? Questions to clarify reason and cluster clarify motivation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I might change. And then I don't know that I think it's smart that we answer these questions in the next week. I think if we chose 3 of them, each of us write a few paragraphs on 3 of them by the next week, that would be a super productive week. I was serious that I wanted to wait to do this until we had done blog posting. This is like, but I'm happy. You guys got the pedal on your gas. You're making this old man work a little bit harder. So what do you think? Out of those 2 groups, which would you guys like to do first? Questions to clarify reason or questions to clarify motivation? For me, I'd probably like to do it like this.
Mm-hmm.
Motivation first and reason second.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Mm-hmm. Can we choose 2 of those? Can we, I think 4 is too many because I would actually like to actually think deeply about them. Can we each commit to next week bringing decent answers? I mean, decent answers means a 0th draft overview of our answers to numbers 1 and 2.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. How are we doing on today's agenda?
Good.
I know, Henry, you have a midterm coming up. Do you want to finish our long form conversation about long form thinking? Do you want to table that to the next meeting? I'm happy to finish. I'm here.
I think both. I think our entire meeting today was long form thinking, so I think that covers that.
I definitely want to talk about that, though. I don't know. Can you give a synopsis of what you were thinking about for that item?
Yeah, it was the motivation behind that agenda item was the realization I was hinting at earlier, which is the fact that just to pass requires some long form thinking in these classes, requires long form thinking in lecture, and I've never, like, just to pass my courses. So
what is long form thinking? What does that mean?
It just means deep thinking, I would say. So in that bit that I shared last week, quite poorly through my phone, he talks about the idea that when people don't engage in long form thinking, aka deep thinking, they oftentimes can become either like hyper radicalized or like conspiracy theorists and just not really pleasant to be around. And I see that a lot in my own life with the people that I'm around, actually, that I live with. And I also see it in my classes now, right? Like if I personally don't engage in deeper thought of what my professors are presenting, I suffer. And if, my roommates don't engage in how they're going to adapt in these difficult times, they suffer as well. So there's some parallel there, but overall, I thought long form thinking is something we can talk about maybe next meeting, but just like what that means in the context of studying.
One challenge that we're facing right now is that, like, for me, I find so much of the value of our weekly meetings. There's multiple levels of what we're doing. We're trying to build the learning code, right? But then you guys are also trying to navigate your institutions, and then I'm also trying to learn from the standpoint of, what are the different pieces of privilege that this system assumes but doesn't grant, right? I can say you guys are some of the hardest workers that I've met at Foothill College. I'm talking about like good hard work, right? That will become scrappy and like fucking leverage their minds and their brains to do hard work, deep work. You're also first generation college students. Each of you, I would say, has navigated this system in a non-standard path. Okay. So as an instructor, I would call you the ideal student that I've ever met. Not ideal in the sense of working with Cal Newport. That's called most privileged students. I've met a lot of those, right? I'm talking about ideal in the sense that you guys are the living dream of our institution, right? In my opinion, first generation college student, hard worker, non-standard path, trying to make the most of your futures. So as an instructor, one of the questions that I've had for a long time is, what do ideal students actually need versus what do we actually provide? And our conversations, when I hear these things and I'm able to the conversations that we have teach me a lot about myself individually, but then also about my role as an instructor and just how far my paid responsibilities are from what we're promising that we deliver, right? And so I find that the conversations that we have, it kind of reminds me of my office hours. I usually don't end office hours until we've come to a place that's like mutually agreeable. So like if a student asks me a question, I'm in the middle of answering that question, or better, if I'm asking them a story about themselves and they're in the middle of telling me that story, I'm probably not going to end and say like, okay, well, I got to go, right? And so I think one of the things that's hard is that in order to agendize the check-in, like we have to agendize an emotional conversation about, right?
Right.
And so like, I would love to think through that with you. It's one of my weakest points from the standpoint of like staying on an agenda, but I think it is a strong point and something that I don't want to lose from our weekly check-in, because I think both of you guys are solving. Henry and Steve, like let me ask Steve. Steve, did you learn something from the conversation that Henry had earlier?
Yeah.
What did you learn?
Wait, in regards of him sharing the, wait, could you just
When I was talking with Henry, what did you learn from that conversation? Something that you took away, like, oh, that is a good takeaway.
I don't know. I'd probably have to rewatch this video before I don't know. I think just this last conversation we had kind of just.
Why? Yeah. So then I would ask the same thing of you, Henry. What was something that you took away from the conversation you had with Steve, that I had with Steve? Is that right?
How can I take some pressure off myself by creating more career paths? To be honest, that's one of the huge missions of the learning code, which is the sooner we can get people to realize they can learn whatever the heck they want to learn, that takes a lot of pressure off them.
And I like, so that's, we can end on that and we can come back. Let's long form thinking. Let's create. In fact, I think I can do this now, right? If I go to our Google Docs, can I create a blank agenda?
I have one templated, Jeff. I have one. I created a bunch already, like that's already dated.
Do I have access to those?
Yeah, you should have access to that entire drive. But sometimes I don't know if it gives you a notification or what. But I'll drop.
Oh, it says owned by somebody else. That's right. Not. I
dropped. I just put it in the Zoom chat next. Oh, just kidding. That is not the. It's the next one. We're already in meeting 9. Okay. I can put it on there, Jeff, as an agenda item.
Yeah, let's put that on there. And then, this is an open question that we have, and that's going to be a negotiation. What would it take? So what are some of the main goals that when we're trying to film videos on a daily basis for, what does that look like? And then on my side, like, I don't want to lose the ability to like talk deeply. If that means that we have to do 2 separate conversations, I'm okay with that, right? Like, I'm okay with the idea that we have a check-in to conversation where we're thinking deeply. And then if we were really hoping to film, then we have a separate space to film those. Or is it possible to do both at the same time? But what I don't want to do is like put the check-in on a clock and then like, oh, we're in the middle of talking about,
Steve's future.
Yeah. Sorry, Steve. It's 2:30, man. You're going to have to put that on a table, right? And so I don't have an answer to that question, but I do think that just let's stay at it like a pit bull on a T-bone, right? Like, let's just keep thinking about it and keep working on it. But I do think that one of the central, for me, I do not want to lose the ability to like listen to your guys' scenarios and give you ideas that are different from the way that you might do this. I want to earn that. So the question that I would always have to both of you guys is, when we do this, is this useful for you? The day that you say no to that is the day that I lose my job for you guys, in which case,
Sounds good.
All right. So I have some writing to do on those 2 first points. And then did you say you were going to make that blank copy of the one next time, or can I think I can do it.
It is, let's see if I can get you the link to the actual drive. Okay, try the most recent link I dropped in Zoom.
Oh, cool.
This should get you to the drive.
Awesome.
I think it's because I'm doing it through the SJSU account. It has some privacy issues sometimes and constraints.
Okay, I got it. So what we need to do is basically put for that item, we're going to put, what was it again? deep form, long form thinking.
Yeah.
And we have also check-ins. I would say that our check-ins seem to go at least 15 minutes. So, and then we also have the idea of our mission statement, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
See you guys. Good luck today, Henry. Good luck, Steve. We'll be in contact.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right.
Jeff, good luck, Henry.
Bye.
Bye.